Vince Zampella sat down with IGN to discuss the future of Battlefield, confirms a modern setting, and teases a community testing program. This is the tweet we got from the official Battlefield account yesterday, and as a channel that was solely focused on this franchise for several years, of course we're gonna take a look at it and talk about it. As usual, I will go through the most important parts of this interview right here in the video, but I've also linked the full article in the description below if you want to read through it yourself. But now let's get right in and see what Vince Zampella has to say and if DICE has learned from the mistakes they made with 2042. And the first two details we can spot right at the beginning are that they want to go back to the roots, more about that later, and that the game will return to a modern setting. So after World War I, II and a futuristic setting we had in 2042, we will now be at a modern one again, similar to Battlefield 3 and 4. Because these are the two games Vince points out a lot during the interview and says that they were the peak of Battlefield, which is definitely something I agree with. And that they have to go back to the core of what Battlefield is and do that amazingly well. And one step back to the roots is that they will focus on 64 player maps and modes again instead of the 128 players we had in 2042. And Vince Zampella says to this that he would rather have nice, dense, well-designed play spaces instead of doing 128 players just for the sake of the number. And I do definitely agree to this. 128 players was an interesting concept and an interesting experiment, but it came at a loss of map design and gameplay. The second step, going back to the roots, is removal of specialists who were not so well received by the player base anyhow. And here I do not really agree with a few things that Vince says. Because first he says the team tried something new. You have to applaud that effort. No, we don't. It was a mistake and you have to acknowledge this and learn from it, but not applaud for the effort. And then he says not everybody liked it, but you gotta try things. That sounds like there were only a few people who didn't like it, while in reality it was the bigger part of the player base and there were only a few people who liked it. Still good to hear that they learned from this and that specialists will not return and instead they will go back to classes. Still, I would love to see them talk a little bit more realistic about 2042 and the mistakes they made there. Because that also shows in what Vince says next. He's careful to stress that Battlefield 2042 wasn't a failure of a game despite not doing as well as hoped. So that's another point where I wish they would be a bit more honest to themselves. The game was a failure when it launched, there is no doubt about this. They slowly got it back on track over the course of its life cycle, yes, for sure they did, but initially it was a failure. Why not call it by its name? Why try to paint everything positive? It wasn't positive at the beginning. It is what it is, and the most important thing is that they learn from it. Anyways, he also says that EA doesn't want a repeat of the experience it had with 2042, which is something I can definitely imagine, especially financially, and that this time they wanted to be good out of the gate. I mean, this sounds very ambitious, but we're still talking about a Battlefield game, and I wouldn't expect a completely flawless experience right from the start. I don't think this is very realistic. But as long as the core gameplay is fun and there's enough content, I can live with a few bugs at the beginning. Zampella also says that the new title will definitely be bigger than former Battlefields, but he's not specific as to what this means. However, we know that 4 studios are currently working on it and that the game will have a single player campaign again alongside the classic multiplayer experience and a new experience of which we don't know what it is yet. But the goal is to expand the Battlefield universe to such an extent that players don't necessarily need to leave it when they want a different experience. So probably kind of the approach Call of Duty had with their small multiplayer maps, larger ground war battles, the Battle Royale mode Warzone in different versions, and on top of this a single player campaign. The only question is, will the Battlefield team be able to maintain all of this? In 2042, 2 of the 3 main parts of the game were dropped shortly after release and received little to no content and support anymore. Of course, this was mainly due to the fact that they had to fix 2042 for quite some time, so I hope they do better with the next one. Zampella also acknowledges that they have to earn the players' trust back and get them back on their side, and one huge step towards this is that they plan to launch a community program next year. There are no details about this yet, of course. It could be a closed beta, it could be some kind of closed playtesting like Skate is doing through the EA Playtesting Network, it could be similar to the classic community testing environments we had in Battlefield 4 and 1, but whatever it is, the more they include the community in their development and testing, the better it is for the game. So that's definitely a good approach here. And at the end, Zampella makes some interesting hints specifically towards the Nintendo Switch and says that he likes the console and that Nintendo, but also Microsoft and Sony, are great partners for them and are important to their business at EA. But there is this strange focus on the Nintendo Switch, and maybe, just maybe, this could be a hint that they will expand Battlefield not only in its size but also to more platforms. And I said this a few months ago already, I would love to see a release for mobile and Switch as well, because that means you can always play your favorite shooter no matter where you are or where you go. But that's just a wild guess from my side here. Alongside the article, we also got a first official artwork of the new game, and I cleaned it up a bit so we can see the full picture without the logo. And of course they didn't say which location or city this could be, but it looks a lot like Southern Europe, maybe Italy or Spain, or maybe South America, something like this. But then again, with wildfires and explosions going on, almost every part of the earth could look like this. And when talking about the wildfires, maybe this is a hint towards natural disasters again that could affect the maps, similar to the tornadoes or sandstorms we had in 2042. The boats on the river or maybe a lake might suggest that naval combat returns, and the helicopters look like Apaches, so we probably see the US as faction again. The color palette is also toned down and looks more like Battlefield 4 instead of the vivid 2042, and if this is the concept for a multiplayer map, it definitely looks atmospheric, like that one map we had in Battlefield 1, Cape Hells, where one team was landing with the boats and then had to fight its way uphill. So looks good for an artwork, nicely atmospheric, but the artworks for 2042 also looked good, so I'm still careful here. Now, this all sounds pretty good so far, and like they definitely learned something from 2042 and probably also from the financial disaster it sure was, but as usual, a little reminder at the end. Don't get caught up in the hype too much, don't fall for the good looking marketing material once this has dropped, and be careful with those pre-orders once they are available. Don't let EA snap with their fingers like an ex that cheated on you multiple times but you still come running. Take a good look at the details, play the beta, and then either go for it or not. Just as a friendly reminder. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you on the next one. Thanks for watching, I'm the Catwoman, and you are awesome.